Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And today we are going to talk pretty much strictly football. We got a lot of news happening in the NFL. We are going to be doing our second round of NFL roster overlooks and overviews and previews, whatever you want to call it. We'll look at two divisions. That's going to be the AFC South and the NFC East today. Look over the rosters and tell you what they need to do in the draft and free agency and how their team fared last year. And we're going to try to get all this done before the signing period and the rosters get all messed up. And then we'll talk about the improvements. We also have, Jared, we have some news today, right? We have a little bit of news today. Dak Prescott finally got his extension. It's like The Rock. Finally, Dak Prescott is back with the Dallas Cowboys. It's been, we were talking before the podcast, Jared. It's a storyline we've been covering on this podcast. I mean, realistically, through the inception of this podcast together, and every single year for the last 3 years at least, and almost every single week, how Dak performed. Does that mean he should get the extension, right? When he got hurt, like it's been one of our podcasts and a lot of other people's, storylines in the NFL, Dak getting re-signed. So without further ado, I'm just going to toss it to you, man. I got to do J.J. Watt before this, and so I'll toss it to you. Dak Prescott gets the extension. Talk about it. Talk about what the extension means. Talk about how much it's for and what you think about it as a Cowboys fan.
That's what I want to do, Nick, is take a big, big, deep breath, right? And listen, like, it's not because I thought Dak wasn't going to play for the Cowboys this year, right? Dak was going to dress in a Dallas Cowboys uniform this year. The question was it going to be on a long-term contract, or for the second straight year, was it going to be on the franchise tag? And fortunately for Dak and for the Cowboys and for Cowboys fans like myself, we get Dak on a long-term contract, a record-breaking, record-setting deal in multiple ways. Right. So not only does Dak Prescott get the money that he rightfully deserves, the Cowboys are able to structure this contract and, still have money set aside to bring in other players. Mm-hmm. So all around, I think this was a win-win. Right. And the talk all along, like you mentioned, for the last couple of years, hasn't just been about what is Dak's worth or what is Dak going to get paid. The other question and the other part of this was, OK, is Dak going to take too much of the pie to where this Cowboys team that needs a lot of help, are they going to be able to get that help? And so, I can't smile any bigger today, right? Because like I said, I'm not only happy for Dak and coming off of that catastrophic injury that he had in week 5 of last season, but this was such a good contract for the Cowboys because they can still go out and sign defensive players, hopefully through free agency and in the draft, and become a more complete team. Right. This Cowboys team has been offensive heavy in the last 2 to 3 years. They can score points. We all know that. They've got weapons. They have Ezekiel Elliott. They have Amari Cooper. They have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and now Dak Prescott locked up. Right. The questions haven't necessarily been about the offense. It's about the complementary pieces on the defense and saying, OK, like, can the defense get a stop? Because last season, the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. Right. It was really pathetic. Like, even with Dallas and Dak Prescott scoring 30-plus points a game, the defense was not able to basically help out and do their part. And so, man, I can't be more excited, man. It's just nice to know that Dak will be in a Dallas Cowboys uniform for at least the next 4 years. He had his press conference already earlier today. We're recording on Wednesday, the 10th. And he said that he wants to be a Dallas Cowboy for life. Right now, obviously, he's super excited, and I'm sure who knows what will happen in the next 4 years. But he said that Dallas is home and that he not only wants to be there for the next 4 years, but for his entire playing career. So, I think one of the things that jumps out to me, and I do want to get your thoughts. I'm not just going to sit here and
no problem.
Podcast, right? But the thing that jumps out to me about this contract is, for the longest time, it was Dallas wanted a longer contract, right? They wanted 5-6 years. Dak wanted 3-4 at the very max. And I think it wasn't necessarily about the money. It was more about the length of the contract and how the money was going to be allocated from year to year. So I think finally, with the 4 years now, it sets up perfectly for Dak, because Dak gets paid, right, $126 million guaranteed, $75 million this season alone. That is a record by, if I'm not mistaken, by at least 20 million, right? Like there is even Patrick Mahomes, who I think is going to make either 40 or 45. Like Dak Prescott is going to just topple that completely. So he'll make 75 this year. But the most interesting thing is, in 4 years, when this contract is up, or at least when this contract can be voided, Dak Prescott will be 31. The NFL will have signed its new TV agreement, which means billions of dollars in revenue that will be coming in to the NFL and more that will be coming down to the players. So Dak Prescott not only cashed in right now, but let's say, Dak continues to ascend and be the player that I hope he can be, leading the Cowboys to hopefully a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl win. Dak Prescott is going to be able to cash in 4 years and make this contract look like peanuts. So I'm saying, man, this is a win-win all around, not just for the Cowboys, but for Dak now and in the future.
Yeah, no, and like you mentioned before, I give my thoughts. Just here's the stuff with the deal. It was $160 million 4 years with 126 guaranteed. That's a lot of guarantee. Like you said, signing bonus $66 million, the highest in NFL history, and a record $75 million due in year one. Average per year $42 million. So yeah, up there with that Dak Prescott, with that Patrick Mahomes money. To the surprise of some people. And then, like you mentioned, the salary cap number hit. Like the NFL's weird with Dak's going to get $75 million, but that's not going to be the cap hit. You know what I'm saying? The cap hit's going to be $22 million instead of the $38 million or so it would have been with the franchise tag. So, smart move by the Cowboys. It wouldn't have made any sense to do the franchise tag this year anyway. So it saves the team about $15 million. And then you now have a franchise quarterback, which I think, here's the thing, which I think is the biggest thing. It doesn't matter what you pay your quarterback, to be honest, in my opinion. You can pay, unless your quarterback's, a sorry quarterback and isn't good, right? But when you pay a guy that you believe is your franchise quarterback, I don't think it matters what you pay him. The Cowboys now, for at least 4 years, have a guy they can rely on every single given Sunday. I've said, whether I've talked about on this podcast here, I've been honest about whether I think he deserves a $42 million a year contract. I still think it's a little bit of a wait and see. I think Dak Prescott can get there, but right now I don't think he's worth that contract. But you know what? It's the NFL. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of jump in the cap number. We'll talk about the cap number before we get into the previews in a second. But Dak will get paid more or paid less, whatever he does on this contract. But man, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like if you're a Cowboys fan, like you are, Jared, you should be happy you have a quarterback for 4 years. That is a guy you guys trust, a guy that's played well. I mean, last year, playing on the franchise tag through 5 games, the Cowboys offense was averaging 33 points a game. And then obviously Dak and a bunch of the offensive linemen got hurt and it went into the crapper and the team didn't play well and didn't make the playoffs. So, yeah, my thoughts on this is anytime you can sign a franchise quarterback or a guy you believe is your franchise quarterback to a long-term deal, it's awesome. The money here is interesting. I don't know if Dak is 100% worth all that money, but he's definitely worth starting quarterback money. So it's not that big of a deal. And I think the Cowboys, they do need other improvements on defense, but you always need the quarterback. And in the modern day NFL, locking up the quarterback is the most important thing. And I'm glad for Cowboys fans, you guys didn't miss out and have to draft somebody or go with Andy Dalton for one. Like, that's the nightmare, and I'm glad that one Texas team figured out their quarterback deal, right?
Ooh, yeah, talk about it, yeah, right, because obviously Houston has a lot of issues and a lot of problems going on. But, here's my thing, right, and you bring up, is Dak really worth all that money? Yeah. And here's my response to that. I agree with you, right? Dak is, number one, Dak Prescott is not Tom Brady. Dak Prescott is not Aaron Rodgers. Dak Prescott is not Patrick Mahomes, right? I think Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback. I would not necessarily say he's a top 3 quarterback. I think you can make the case that Deshaun Watson is better than Dak. But after those 4 quarterbacks that I just mentioned, I think any other quarterback in the league, whether you want to talk about a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, I mean, anyone else, I think I can legitimately make an argument that Dak Prescott is just as good, if not better, than anyone else. So to me, I think Dak Prescott – oh, actually, I'm sorry. I forgot about Russell Wilson. Did not mean to forget about that. So there's 5 quarterbacks right there, right? So I think Dak Prescott really at number 6 is slotted right where he should be. I think there are 5 quarterbacks that are arguably better than him, and after that, so yeah, is he really worth that Patrick Mahomes $40 million money? Maybe not, right? And that's coming from a true Cowboys fan. But here's the thing: if Dallas did not own up and basically come to that number, what's their alternative? Andy Dalton, right? Or some other guy, or potentially have to move up in the draft to get a Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson, right? Because they're sitting at number 10 in the draft right now. You're not going to get Trevor Lawrence. That's a foregone conclusion. He's going to Jacksonville, right? So what are you going to do, right? And I think it's a situation that's obviously tricky. And it's if we don't do this, we're stuck with this. If we do this, you know what I mean? It's a back and forth. What do you do? So I think if you have a top 10 quarterback, I think you almost have to pay him top tier money, right?
Yeah.
Like coming up this in the next offseason or the next few off seasons, we're going to see Lamar Jackson. We're going to see Josh Allen. We're going to look at Dak's contract and say, that's our starting point. Yeah. Now, are those guys necessarily worth $40 million as well? I don't know. But I think we can both agree that those guys are as well top 10 quarterbacks. And when you are a top 10 guy, when you're a guy that is the franchise leader that you're building a team around, as a quarterback, you kind of get to name your own price. And you basically go to the team and say, you're going to pay me this, or eventually I'm going to walk and you're going to get nothing. You're going to have to start over. Yeah. Most teams don't want to start over, right? Quarterbacks don't grow on trees. Well, they might, but great to elite quarterbacks do not grow on trees. And so when you have one, as a team, you are basically like at the mercy of that quarterback when it comes to a point. I believe it was the Ravens, either general manager or CEO, who came out yesterday in a press conference and was speaking on Lamar Jackson when a reporter asked, hey, Lamar Jackson is up for a contract extension starting this offseason, right? And he basically came out and said, yeah, it's like being at the Bentley store, like at the Bentley deal, right? Like, you're looking at a Bentley, how much a Bentley costs, right? You're not going there asking for like a crazy discount because you're not going to get it, right? And so when you walk into that Bentley store, you either have the money and that you're going to spend it, or you just don't even go in there in the first place. Mm-hmm. So to me, whether it's the Cowboys with Dak or any of those other young and up-and-coming quarterbacks that I just mentioned, as an organization, they know they're going to have to pay these guys. And in the Cowboys case, they chose to wait 2 off seasons because Jerry Jones and the rest of that organization is very stubborn. Yeah. And unfortunately, Dak Prescott suffered a major injury, right? Yeah. But eventually, these teams have to pay up.
Well, so I think the other part of this whole Dak Prescott deal is, why did this take so long? Because in my opinion, the only reason I am even on a podcast talking about what Dak's worth is because he didn't get paid, right? Normally you just see guys get paid and then you can talk crap like we do on Jared Goff and we say he wasn't worth that contract. Or when he signed it, you go, I don't know if he's worth that contract. Like, Dak is better than a guy like Jared Goff and still wasn't getting paid. And now look, now he's getting paid $7 more million than Jared Goff, and he's actually going to start and he's actually going to have a career in the NFL. Something we don't know about a guy like Jared Goff, who's number 5 on the contract list, by the way. If you're looking, he actually gets paid the same as Aaron Rodgers. So when you look at Dak, Jared, why did it take so long? I know you said that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones are stubborn, but why put yourself into that corner? And why did they sign guys like Jalen Smith and Ezekiel Elliott and others first? And why do you not go with the quarterback? Did they just not trust Dak, or is there something this offseason? Like, how did it work? Why did they wait so long, in your opinion?
I honestly think it's because you can say trust, or they just didn't necessarily have 100% faith in Dak Prescott. Now, listen, when Dak came out as a 4th-round draft pick, I don't think anyone, including myself, in the years to come what Dak would eventually be, which he is now, right? Which is in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback. And I think he sits at number 6 after those 5 that I just mentioned, right? But as a 4th-round pick coming in, and you are like no doubt the backup, because at the time Tony Romo was still there. And if I remember correctly, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys were actually looking to trade back into the 1st round of that year's draft in 2016 to get Paxton Lynch and or a Connor Cook, right? Like, they wanted other quarterbacks, and Dak Prescott literally fell into their lap, right? So they got very lucky. And they should be thanking their stars literally because I mean I don't know how another team didn't pick Dak Prescott, but and I know that he had a lot to prove coming out of college. It's not like he was a completely polished quarterback, or else he would have been drafted higher. But to me, when you get a guy in the 4th round and for 4 years you pay him a total of $4 million,
Oh, nice.
what
Yeah.
do you expect that guy to do when in 4 years he leads your team to the playoff twice? And then in the 4th year, this past offseason or this past year, he literally puts up numbers that were going to be record breaking. And then he unfortunately suffers that catastrophic injury in week 5, right? So you expect the guy who's the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys for 4 straight years, and he gets a total of $4 million. You expect him to come to the negotiating table and want to take a discount?
Yeah.
And your argument as Jerry Jones and the owner and general manager of the Cowboys is, well, because of our brand, because we're in the state of Texas with no state income tax, because of the things that we can provide for you off the field, that money will basically make up what you lose in the contract. No.
Yeah, no. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
So to me, Dak Prescott put his foot down from the beginning, him and his agent, and they said, we are getting paid what we're not taking a hometown discount. Like, we appreciate you drafting us in the 4th round, and we appreciate you, having faith in us to give us a starting job over Tony Romo eventually. But now I've proven what I can do. I've proven my worth, and I'm still ascending. What you pay for in a contract, whether you're, signing a free agent or whether you're drafting a guy, is for their potential down the road. You're not paying for what a guy already did, right? You're not paying a college athlete because of what they did in college. Who knows what they're going to be in the pros? You're paying for their potential.
Yeah.
For Dak Prescott, you're paying him all of that money because you see him ascending and potentially taking this team to greater heights, right? Potentially a Super Bowl, which they haven't been to in 25 years, since I was 5 years old, right? Like, it's been a damn minute since this team has won. So I think Jerry Jones and the rest of this organization finally had to bite the bullet and say, okay, we can't come to the table shortchanged. We have to basically give in to some of these needs that Dak wants. And I don't believe you mentioned it. Not only did Dak Prescott get the record-setting $66 million signing bonus, he also gets a no-trade clause and a no-tag provision. So no-trade clause is Cowboys can't trade him unless Dak Prescott says so, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully that never even has to happen, or that thought never even has to occur in my mind again. But, you never know in today's world. So if something were to happen and the Cowboys said, all right, we want to trade Dak Prescott, and they enter in negotiations with another team, Dak Prescott can simply say, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going to Chicago. It's too cold, right? Send me out west somewhere. And also no trade provision. So if a team, whether it's the Dallas Cowboys or any other team, ever decides to franchise tag Dak Prescott again, it will be the full 140% market increase.
Wow.
So it'll be like the full extent of the franchise tag. So basically, Dak Prescott holds all of the cards right now. Right?
I mean, Jared, that's the way it should be, because like you mentioned, $4 million over his entire NFL career. That's half of what most of the 1st-round draft pick quarterbacks make this year, right? Just this year, only half. Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Sam Darnold, all these guys are on $8, $9, $7 million contracts per year. And Dak, the Cowboys got him for $4 million over what, 4 years. So, again, if you talk about Dak Prescott being greedy, no, this guy, technically the $40 million, getting up to that contract, he deserves that, right? Like, if they would have paid him $32 million, that's still getting underpaid, because he deserved that $7, $8, $9 million over those other years. So yeah, good for Dak Prescott. I never had a problem with him asking for a bigger contract. And I think maybe when you see this larger contract come through, there's an answer to it. There's an answer to why he got such a big contract, because they didn't pay him the years before, and it's kind of almost back pay, right? So it makes me actually feel a little bit better about the contract myself. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to say one last thing, and it just popped into my head right now, right? And I actually saw this on Facebook. A friend of mine posted this, and it was of Tom Brady, and it was a meme, right? And it said, I'm not verbatim here, but it basically said, Tom Brady has won multiple championships, right? And he's taken pay cuts throughout his NFL lifetime in order to help his team teams, mainly the Patriots and now the Bucks, so that those teams can surround him with better talent. And so it was basically a knock on every other quarterback who has chosen to get their money and not take a discount, right? So my argument to that is simply this. Number one, Tom Brady's been in this league since what, like 2000, like the early 2000s,
Yeah,
2002?
I think, yeah.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, the first time that he actually took an actual discount was in like, I don't know, 2013, 14, 15, something like that.
Yeah.
He'd already been in the league for 10 years, had already made like probably close to $100 million, if not more. And let's not forget the most important fact that he is married to a woman that makes 3 times as much money as he does. So I'm pretty sure the Brady family will do just fine with Tom taking a discount, right?
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
No offense to any of these other wives out there, but I don't think that, Russell Wilson, even though he's married to Sierra, who has her own money and doing her own thing, or Dak Prescott or Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes or any of these other dudes have wives or girlfriends or significant others that make 3 times money much as they do, right?
Yeah,
so
no, good
to
point.
me, I think it was a little easier for Tom Brady to take that discount, knowing that he was still getting money on the back end. These other quarterbacks are a lot younger, and for most of them, just like Dak Prescott, it's their first time being able to cash in. So their job is not to worry about, the team necessarily having money to spend. This is the NFL stands for not for long. Obviously, Dak Prescott has already suffered a catastrophic injury, and hopefully he doesn't, knock on wood. But you never know if that will happen again, and he will have to end his career. You get your money when you can, and you let the organization and the team worry about the salary cap and worry about putting a team around you. You do what you have to do to get your money. So I don't ever fault a player for doing that. Some people call it greedy. What I say is, look at these owners and tell me these owners aren't greedy for the amount of money that they make.
100%.
You're going to tell me that they're going to take a pay cut? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's totally true. And like I was saying earlier, anytime you can get a franchise quarterback, pay him whatever you want. Now, I don't think Dak Prescott deserves more than Patrick Mahomes. I don't think most quarterbacks deserve more than Patrick Mahomes. But again, you look at the contract, he's getting paid $40 million or $42 million per year. That's not exactly how it ends up being out, but that's essentially what he's getting. He'll eventually get $160 million, obviously, and at least $126 million. When you look at that, again, he wasn't paid before that. So, Cowboys fans and NFL fans that think this contract is too big, again, he would have got paid that money, prior to this. And I think if he would have got paid that money and he would have been a first-round pick, he wouldn't be getting $42 million a year. I think maybe it'd be a little bit lower. So, again, you get your franchise quarterback. That's the most important thing. Look at these teams like like the Packers and the Seahawks that have Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. They pay him a lot. Maybe you say they were overpaid, whatever. They should take a pay cut because they've been in the league a long time. Well, no, because the reason those teams are even good at all is because of those guys, right? Tom Brady, like you mentioned, was in the league for 15 years before he started taking pay cuts. So, yeah, he's taking pay cuts now, and he should because, again, he's got a super rich wife, and he shouldn't demand at 42 years old or 45 years old $40 million, right? I know he's so valuable, but, again, if you actually look at Tom Brady, he can't run the ball, right? He has limited mobility. Like, that guy probably doesn't deserve as much as Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson, all that stuff. I get the Super Bowl pedigree, but yeah. Yeah, very interesting stuff. And Jared, before we get too much into the Cowboys depth and talking about the Cowboys and how Dak Prescott's contract gets in, and we're going to get to our team overlooks in the NFC East and AFC South in just a second. I wanted to mention that, again, this NFL year is a little different free agency, and that's why it's a little troubling to me that the Cowboys waited this long to give Dak this money, and it ended up working out because of the cap hit. But just so you guys know, last year's salary cap was $198 million. And Jared explained to me before the podcast that it was supposed to jump to about $210 million, at least over $200 million this year. It's at $182 this year. So it decreased $16 million, about 8%. So a lot of teams are cutting people, and you guys might wonder why we're not talking about certain guys getting cut. It's because we expected it, and it's because it's not as big of a deal as it normally would be. And we almost expect these stars to get released. So, if we maybe don't mention something about one of these teams or how they release somebody, it's just because we expect it, and we're going to wait till the signing period, in a few weeks here, in a couple weeks, to talk about where these guys get signed. It's not as important this year, guys getting cut. It's going to be more important where they sign because of the salary cap. We just want to mention salary cap is down $16 million, something unprecedented in the NFL in the last couple of years. It will jump, and and again, this is why you'll see a lot of contracts getting manipulated this year. If you look at Big Ben's contract, he's not getting paid anything this next year, and a lot of other stars will probably decrease their contracts this year, and then it will double the year after that when they can afford it. So very, very interesting stuff, but we're not going to talk about that in this podcast. And so let's get to our overviews, Jerry. We'll start with the NFC East, and we'll start with the Cowboys because we were already talking about them. I'll give my thoughts on the Cowboys first because we've obviously been talking about Dak, and I'll let you go more in depth on your own team, obviously. So when I look at the Cowboys, obviously Dak re-signed, I've explained. You now have your quarterback, and that offense is untouched, right? And the offense will get better because the offensive line will be healthy. Hopefully, obviously, you hope that it doesn't get hurt. But I mean, your top 4 linemen were injured last year. Some guys not even playing games at all. You obviously had, late season retirements last year and stuff like that, or late off-season retirements in Travis Frederick and guys like that. So, the Cowboys' offense will be better next year. And again, when you look at the Cowboys when they were the most healthy, they were averaging 33 points a game. That's crazy. That's almost 5 touchdowns a game. That's 5 scores a game, essentially. So the Cowboys' offense is not of my concern. It's the defense. Now, they do improve coaching in Mike Nolan to Dan Quinn. I think a lot of people, if you just looked on paper, is Dan Quinn a better coach than Mike Nolan? Yes, right? He led the Atlanta Falcons defense. There was really not much to a Super Bowl, right? It's sputtered over the years because of older offensive players and defensive players leaving, but Dan Quinn was a solid coach for the Atlanta Falcons, and now he's a defensive coordinator. The one problem with that is there's a lot of issues with just the Cowboys personnel, right? The linebacking core that was supposed to be led by Jalen Smith and Van Der Esch was actually kind of the bane of the team, right? Those guys didn't play well at all, and really the rest of the defense didn't play good at all. And teams that didn't have rushing attacks were rushing against the Cowboys, something that you would not have thought of 2-3 years ago, the Cowboys with all the guys they had signed. So I think with this team, their only need here now after signing Dak is defense. Go out and retain the guys you can that actually play well for you and sign as many defenders as you can with whatever the salary cap you have. I'm not exactly sure that the Cowboys number after this Dak signing, because again, they just revealed the salary cap and then they signed Dak on the same day. So it's a little confusing with the Cowboys, how much money they have. And maybe Jared, you can explain that to me as well. But I just think the one thing with this team is defense. And I'll say one more thing before I toss it to you. The Cowboys obviously would have made the playoffs last year if they had Dak and the offensive line was even a little bit healthier. Okay. So this team with the NFC East not being that good of a division is a potential playoff team. I do think, though, they have to severely fix this defense to be a Super Bowl contender. But I think they are a playoff team because of the division they play in. So, Jared, I'll toss it to you. Do you agree with me? Do you think it's just solely defense, or do you think the offense needs some help, too?
When we talk about the Dallas Cowboys and what they need to fix and / improve in order to get themselves into the playoffs and hopefully onto a Super Bowl run, we can't say defense enough times. It is defense, and so much defense that I'm going to nauseate myself by just saying defense, right? You mentioned it already. We don't need to go over the offensive weapons that they have. If there is a position that I think they can, help or get some more depth at, I would say it's the offensive line. Yeah. Just like we saw in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. You don't have your 2 offensive tackles. I don't care how good you are, how much money you're getting paid. You are still going to struggle. And that's exactly what happened to Dallas when they lost Tyron Smith. He only played in week 1. And then who was their left tackle and their right tackle, and Lyle Collins missed the entire season, never even suited up for them. Right. And then we had Zach Martin, who is arguably the best guard in all of the NFL next to Quentin Nelson of the Colts. He got injured midway through the season. He was gone. So the Cowboys were, and like you mentioned, Travis Frederick had retired last offseason. So there's your 4 best offensive linemen, and not only best, but veterans as well, who are completely gone. And they were left with a mosh podge of dudes who just, no offense, they just couldn't get the job done. Yeah. And then you lose Dak Prescott, and it's just a snowball. And so, yes, and of course, this is with every team, but albeit if they stay healthy, this offense will be able to score close to, if not average 30 points a game, in my opinion. This is strictly about defense. Now, I will say this. Yes, the linebacking core was not great last year. They are paying Jalen Smith as if he is one of the best linebackers in the league. He was clearly not that last year. So I don't know if it needs to be more of a position change, if he needs to move from like on-ball to off-ball linebacker, or if he needs to move into more of a kind of pass rush situational linebacker role. Even though they're paying him a boatload of money to be a 3-down linebacker, I simply don't think he is that anymore. And I think that he needs to be more of a rotational guy. I would say that Leighton Vander Esch is clearly their best linebacker. He broke his collarbone last year, so he missed half of the season. And I just don't think he was ever comfortable in the role that Mike Nolan was putting him in. So the fact that Dan Quinn is coming in, this team right now, the talent that they have is suited for Dan Quinn's system.
There you go.
Now, obviously, they need to upgrade and get better talent. But if the Cowboys were to not add one new defensive player to this team, I would already say that just by lining up, they're going to be a little bit better, just because they're going to be in a system that they have somewhat succeeded in 2, 3, 4 years ago under Rob Marinelli, right? It's a not basic, but it is essentially a 4-3 defense. So, DeMarcus Lawrence up front is one guy that needs to play better. The guy's getting paid $20 million to rush the passer, and I don't think he had 7 sacks last year, right? Sorry, that's just not good enough.
Ridiculous.
Right? I get it. He was banged up. He had injuries, all that stuff. You're getting paid $20 million. You need to be a double-digit sack guy no matter what. So for me, it is improve the pass rush, because I think my philosophy is you build a team from the inside out. Whether it's offensively or defensively, you have to start from the offensive and defensive line and then work your way out from there. If you don't have a pass rush, I don't care if you're Deion Sanders, Patrick Peterson, you can be the best cornerback ever. You can only guard a guy for so long before he's going to get open and the quarterback's going to be able to complete a pass to the receiver or tight end. And so I think the Cowboys need to bolster their pass rush. They need to put Jalen Smith in more situational circumstances as opposed to a three down linebacker. And I think they need to draft a corner with their first overall pick and pair someone with Trayvon Diggs, who was their second round corner from last year's draft. So I think they have pieces. It's just about implementing Dan Quinn's 4-3 system, right? Getting back to a little more familiarity and adding some pass rush. And like I said, like I've said this before, this Cowboys defense doesn't have to be the best in the NFL. They don't even have to be top 5. Hell, they don't even have to be top 10. Just be average. Be middle of the pack. And if this defense is middle of the pack, 15th or 16th in the league, to pair with the dynamic offense that Dak Prescott is going to bring along with the others, this Cowboys team is to me not only like playoff worthy, but they can actually do something in the playoffs, right? And get themselves past the first round, which they haven't done in almost 25 years. So it's not that we're asking for the world and this team to go from, last to first on defense. It's just be middle of the pack. Like, don't suck. Don't be a Swiss cheese defense.
Don't suck.
Be able to stop the run at some point. That's all we're asking for.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I think when you, like we mentioned, the whole defense kind of needs to get fixed. And you guys obviously have pieces that can play amazing. And maybe it was the scheme. Maybe it was the overall fact that the whole defense sucks and nobody wanted to play hard. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that. Like that can be demoralizing too. Your quarterback's hurt. Your offensive line's hurt. The backups aren't playing well. And then the defense is shoved into this role. They already aren't good, and then they have to do better because the offense is now playing well. I can understand why the Cowboys defense wasn't great last year. But again, if it continues this year, it monumentally screws the team. And it screws the Dak contract and all this stuff. And so that defense is the most important thing in Arlington, Texas next year. In that stadium, the defense needs to play, like you said, at least average, right? And I think with those guys and maybe guys they can sign, it can be a great team. So, Jerry, again, so you obviously think playoffs. Do you think they're a legitimate contender? Like, what if they add a couple pieces on defense, are the Cowboys a legitimate contender?
We're gonna throw the caveat in there that they draft 2 or 3 good defenders and they're able to sign 1 or 2 defenders in free agency. Yes, I will. I think their offense is so powerful, right? And if they can average 30 points a game and just have an average defense, yes, I think it is. Now, getting into the playoffs, and we've said this multiple times before, right? This isn't anything new. Defense does win championships. We saw that this past year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how dominant that defense was, not only throughout the regular season, but in the playoffs, stopping the likes of, Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes and Drew Brees and all those guys. So, yes, at some point throughout the season, you would hope that this Cowboys team, that the defense continues to improve and get better, right? But if they add just a couple pieces, one at each level, if they add a piece on the defensive line, one at the linebacker, and one in the secondary spot, with the offense, yes, I'm going to say that this team is contending for a Super Bowl, not just for the playoffs. And also, I will say this, with Dak's contract now set in place, and the fact that you've got Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper on the books, not only for the next couple years, but here's another important note. After, I believe it's in 2 years, so 2023, there's a potential void out for Ezekiel Elliott's contract and Amari Cooper's contract. So the clock's ticking on this team's window to win right now. Like, their win mode is right now. You do what you have to do, sign the veterans, sign the young talent, build the best nucleus you can, and there is no more like just winning the division and hope to make it to the playoffs and see what happens. Like, this team's focus needs to be Super Bowl or bust, period.
There you go. You heard it here. And I agree with you. I think they're a playoff team. I have to just see so much improvement on defense. I can't say they're contenders, but if they sign up big time guys and they start out well and stuff like that, and they start off kind of shutting down some teams next season, you might hear me put the Cowboys in the Super Bowl contention as well. But I gotta wait and see a little bit. All right, let's move to the team that won the NFC East last year. That is the Washington football team. The biggest news so far this offseason is the release of Alex Smith. It saves the team $14-15 million. Jerry, I'll give you first crack on Washington. What do you think about this team going forward this season after making the playoffs last year?
This team is scary, man, right? And I think this team jumped out last year as a major surprise. And we saw what they did defensively. I think this team literally rallied around head coach Ron Rivera. We know how great of a coach he was. Like, listen, I think Carolina is building something there, and I think they've got a good head coach in Matt Rule and a good system. Yeah. But I still don't know how you let Ron Rivera go, right? So the fact that Washington was able to get him, I think, was a huge get because he kind of just stabilized and solidified that team a little bit. There was a lot of controversy going on. Obviously, the whole Dwayne Haskins quarterback situation did not work out. But to me, especially from a defensive perspective, when you've got the likes of Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat on your defensive line. Now, by the way, those were all like first-round draft pick guys. And because the Washington football team has sucked for so many years, they've had a lot of first-round picks. So they've just been able to hit on those. But that defensive line is nasty, and it's the same thing that I'm trying to talk about with the Cowboys. If you have a great pass rush, it makes up for the lack of depth on the back end in the secondary.
No doubt.
I'm looking at the Washington football team secondary right now, and they have Kendall Fuller, Ronald Darby, and Landon Collins. Now, I would say those are three fairly solid players.
I believe too, Collins and Darby are pending free agents. Like, they might not even be on the team next year. So that really, those are solid players. But again, there's probably regression in the secondary. But I'll give you a take first. I'll get into mine.
Just even more to my point, right? This pass rush played so well last year and needs to continue to play well because Washington probably isn't going to have the money to go out and get, replace all two or three of those guys or however many secondary players aren't there anymore. So to me, when I look at Washington, their defense stands out number one, right? And I think that's what carries them into games. The biggest question for me, and honestly, one of the reasons why I'm not putting them ahead of the Cowboys, because I think their defense is obviously way better. The Cowboys have a better offense and I think the best quarterback in the division, which is why I'm putting the Cowboys at number one. But Washington does not currently have a starting quarterback. Yeah. They released Alex Smith, right? They obviously traded or did not bring back Dwayne Haskins. So they currently have Taylor Heineke, who obviously made a name for himself in that playoff game against the Bucs and actually almost won that game, right? And then they had Kyle Allen, who was in Carolina with Ron Rivera. So there's that relationship there. But other than that, they don't have a quarterback on this team. So without a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback in this league, you're not going to win even with a great defense. And so if they can, I don't know who they're going to get, whether they're going to potentially move up and draft a guy or whether they're going to trade for a quarterback. If this team gets a legit quarterback, like a top 15 quarterback in the league, this team will contend for the NFC East division. And they might be better than Dallas. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. So without a quarterback, I'm keeping Dallas at number one, clear-cut number one. Washington gets a legitimate quarterback on their hands, they're going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, you stole almost everything that I had written down right here. The defensive line is the best part of this team. Like you mentioned, you can have a good defensive line and a bad secondary because the defensive line cannot even allow the secondary to have to play defense on a play, right? Quarterback gets sacked, secondary doesn't have to do anything, right? So, yeah, and Washington's overall solid on defense. The rest of, besides the defensive line, it's not a bad defense, right? It's still a serviceable average defense, at best. And then so, besides the team needing upgrades at safety and linebacker, I think this team needs, they need another wide receiver, and obviously the quarterback, right? Kyle Allen and Taylor Heineke are not starting quarterbacks. They are very, very good backups, as we saw with Tyler Heineke, and we've seen Kyle Allen succeed in certain games in the NFL, but they are not your franchise quarterback. We've been talking about franchise quarterbacks like Dak Prescott all this podcast. Those guys are nowhere near Dak Prescott, okay? And so I know they re-signed Heineke. I know he played well against the Buccaneers. I know technically Heineke was the best quarterback against the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers, but it's not realistic, guys. It's a one-hit wonder. And Heineke could be a good backup, and would be a good serviceable starter, but those guys are not, guys. So, yeah, they need a legit starting quarterback. Who that is, I don't know. Maybe they draft a guy. I know they don't have the best draft pick because they made the playoffs, unfortunately. So, it'll be interesting to see what the team is. Underrated, too. Top 10 offensive line last year, which is very surprising. So a quarterback coming in, and most of them come back. A quarterback coming in, this is a good situation. This is not, Carson Wentz in Philadelphia and these teams with bad offensive lines. Good offensive line, solid running back, a very good wide receiver in Terry McLaurin already to throw to. And then you make a little bit of improvements in the passing game. A quarterback coming in this situation is solid. Now, I'll be legit. Does a quarterback want to come into this franchise specifically with this owner and all this stuff and the name not even have a team? Like, that's going to hinder Washington for sure. And it's one of the reasons they don't have a top 15, top 10 quarterback on this roster. So we'll see what happens. But I agree with you, Jared. I do think that if Washington gets a quarterback, they are on par with the Cowboys as a playoff team. And I can agree with you that they potentially could even win the division. So we agree completely. I just think with that organization specifically, it's going to be tough for them to get a top 15 quarterback because the owner sucks and they don't have a good track record of good quarterbacks besides Joe Theismann, and he broke his leg and they haven't had a guy since. So, I know RG3 played well. I know Kirk Cousins played well, but those guys were not, Dak level, Russell Wilson, all that stuff. So it'd be interesting to see what this team adds. Any more thoughts on Washington, or should we move on to New York or Philly?
No, let's move on, man. I think, listen, we made it very clear. They have a great defense. If they get some offensive pieces, a quarterback, there'll be a problem.
Absolutely. So let's go to Philadelphia. We have a new era in Philadelphia. We talked a little bit about this on one of our last few podcasts.
Philadelphia.
Jalen Hurts era has begun. And so Jalen Hurts has the full reins at quarterback. He'll join Miles Sanders in that backfield to form a pretty good backfield. Problem is the rest of this team isn't very good. And really, like, the only positive you can look at is just the two guys that will be handling the ball on every play, and that's Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts. But besides that, the offensive line isn't bad, but it's not great either. And the defense, besides the defensive line, is not very good. And the wide receiving core has been awful, as Shaquille O'Neal would say, the last, I don't even know, number of years. So, I don't think this Eagles team is going to be very good next year. They are also like $40 million over the cap right now. So they're not going to be signing guys in free agency. So I don't think this team's going to be very good. I do think Jalen Hurts, though, can be good enough to make this team serviceable. Like, I do think this team will beat some teams, and I do think they'll play well against the division. But I don't think this team's anywhere near the playoffs, and I'm more interested just to see how Jalen Hurts progresses as a starter. Besides that, I think this team doesn't have much, and they're going to be wasting away Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham's last few years with this team. That's what I think.
First of all, Brandon Graham, I believe, is a free agent and probably won't even be on this team
so
this year because I don't think Philadelphia will be able to afford him. Secondly, this team is still paying or has a dead cap hit of $33.8 million for Carson Wentz, who will not play a single snap for this team because he's with the Indianapolis Colts, right? So on top of the salary cap going down $16 million, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Eagles are paying for a guy that they no longer have on their team, right? And third, and I think most importantly, you know why this team is going to suck and why they will no doubtedly be the worst team in the NFC East?
Yeah.
Because head coach Nick Sirianni's opening team press conference.
That's right.
Sorry.
I forgot about that.
I don't care if you're a fan or a player. I don't know how you can be excited, how you can have any type of enthusiasm or optimism that this team is going to be good after that press conference. It's like the dude has never spoken in front of a camera in his life. It was so pathetic. Like, if you haven't seen it, please, after you're done watching this show, go to YouTube, type in Philadelphia Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni. Not necessarily sure how to spell Sirianni, so I'm not going to say that, but you get the gist of it. Go to YouTube and please watch that press conference, and you will understand how awful and how bad the press conference was. Like I said, if you're Jalen Hurts or you're just anyone on that Eagles team, trade me today. I don't want any part of that. This Eagles team is not only in financial capital hell, but they just lack talent. They released Alshon Jeffrey. They released Deshaun Jackson, two of their mainstay wide receivers who unfortunately haven't been able to stay healthy in the last 2 years. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this, Brandon Graham more than likely isn't going to be there. So we're looking at Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, who's a good, serviceable, solid running back.
Yeah.
And then you got Fletcher Cox and Darius Slay. Fletcher Cox, the defensive tackle, Darius Slay, a corner. Like, those are the four pieces on this Philadelphia Eagles team that you can look at and have any type of optimism or even smile at. Like, right, they have some actually okay pieces on the offensive line, but realistically, they need so much help and just don't have the financial pieces to do it, that this is going to be somewhat of a rebuild. And their owner, Jeffrey Lurie, already came out earlier this week saying he doesn't want a quarterback competition. He wants Jalen Hurts as his guy. Yeah, so this new head coach doesn't even get a say. Like, we don't know what he actually wants, but he doesn't get a choice. Jalen Hurts is his guy. So they may draft a quarterback in this draft. Guarantee you it's not going to be top 10 with their first overall pick, because their owners already come out and said this is Jalen Hurts' team for at least this season.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be. You need to give Jalen Hurts 1 year. He showed enough in those games when he started over Carson Wentz at the end of the year to, deserve a chance at 1 year. And I think with his pedigree of being Alabama quarterback, winning a national championship, all that stuff, he should be a guy there and should be the starter. Let's move on to the New York Football Giants. I think the biggest thing with this team, Jared, because the Giants just have not been very good the last few years.
They suck. You can say it. It's okay. I'll say it for you. It's fine.
Well, it's hard. You know what's hard, Jared, is because we had to watch so many of these stupid NFC East games last year because of the whole playoff scenario that, like, the Giants played well in some games against bad teams, and you're like, oh, are they actually good? But realistically, they're probably not. So I'll just say this. My biggest takeaway on this is Daniel Jones is in his third year, correct? Third year as a quarterback?
Going in.
He can't regress. He needs to improve as a starter. He showed signs last year. I just laughed because I remembered him falling before the end zone. You remember that? Remember that play? I forget.
Breakaway touchdown.
Yeah,
no one within 20 yards of him, and sniper.
As he runs too forward, his chest is out. His chest is out oddly when he runs. Daniel Jones, he's in his third year. He needs to progress because this team is still rebuilding. They're getting a bit better. Jones needs to be the guy. Now, they get Saquon Barkley back this year, which is huge, right? Saquon Barkley is a star in the NFL. He's a top 5 running back. And he's even, a great wide receiver as well. He does both, and he makes it a little easier on the whole team. But I just think the biggest thing about this team is Daniel Jones. What's going to be of Daniel Jones after this season? Are they going to be looking at him as the franchise quarterback? Are they going to be looking at him as maybe extending him? Or are they going to be looking at, we don't have a franchise quarterback and we need to draft a guy or sign a guy? Because I think Daniel Jones, he didn't have a very good first year. He had a little bit better of a second year, but his jumps of progression have not been of the likes of Josh Allen or Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield. He has kind of sputtered a bit, and he hasn't improved. He's been more like a Carson Wentz or a Jared Goff, where he's improved a little bit. So I think Daniel Jones in his final year, or I think this is his final year with the team if he can't prove he's a starter. Now, again, he does get help of Saquon Barkley. He does get help with Evan Ingram on that team, who had a very good year, finally was healthy last year. But, it's troubling. And, the offensive line hasn't been good the last 2 years, so it's not as fair to him. I think if they improve that offensive line, he can have a better year. And they add a receiver or two. But again, I think this whole thing is about Daniel Jones next year and to see what he can do in his third year. This defense isn't very good. They need help. I don't think this is a playoff team unless Daniel Jones just balls out with Saquon Barkley and they just shock us and they add stuff on defense. But I at least think this whole year is about Daniel Jones.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is about Daniel Jones. I think this is the third best team in the division. I think they're ahead of the Eagles. I don't think they're as bad. At least they have some type of consistency with their head coach and Joe Judge. And I think a guy that this team was able to rally around, kind of similar to what the Washington football team did with head coach Ron Rivera, right? I think Joe Judge commands respect in the locker room. And I think the players on this team bought into what he was trying to say, even though Joe Judge had never been a head coach before, and he had never even been a coordinator. He was a special teams coach, right? And so you don't see that often when a special teams coach kind of jumps the ranks a little bit and skips the coordinating position and goes straight to head coach. But obviously coming from the Bill Belichick tree, he's been groomed very well. And like I said, I think the players bought into what he was trying to do. It's just when you lose your best player on offense and a Saquon Barkley, and then on defense, they weren't able to put it together. They have some nice pieces on the defensive line in Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Giants franchise tagged Leonard Williams. They traded for him from the New York Jets a couple years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So he got to stay in New York to switch teams. They're trying to work out a long-term deal with him, and I think they need to, because you take Leonard Williams off of this defensive line, and it's Dexter Lawrence and nobody else, right? So they have a lot of holes on defense. But you're right. This is about Daniel Jones, and I don't think he will take that step. I think there's enough of a book on him already in 2 full seasons to say he is what he is. He's going to make some nice throws, but I think he's going to make enough bad throws, right? And by bad throws, I don't just mean incompletions or missing a guy. I'm talking about turning the ball over. Daniel Jones, since he has come into the league, he either leads the NFL or he's like top 2 or 3 in turning the ball over from the quarterback position. And I'm talking interceptions and fumbles. Like, the guy just does not know how to protect the football. And so that is the most important part of playing quarterback. It's to protect the football and throw it to your guys. And too many times he throws it to the other team or gets sacked and he can't hold on to the football. So to me, there's a book on Daniel Jones already. This is basically his last year. This year for me, for Daniel Jones, isn't whether he gets a crazy long-term extension, because I think the Giants would be out of their minds to sign Daniel Jones to like $100 million extension and be anywhere near, the likes of the Dak Prescotts or the Deshaun Watsons or any of these guys that are about to sign major extensions. I think this year is for Daniel Jones to say that I can still play in this league as a serviceable quarterback, more than likely a backup. If you're the Giants, you're playing out this year as somewhat of a rebuild, kind of get that defense rebuilt a little bit, get the offensive line built a little bit. And they're looking to draft a quarterback within the next 1 to 2 years and or trade for a superstar quarterback. I think that's where the Giants mentality has to be. If they're going in saying Daniel Jones is our guy for the foreseeable future, I think that's a mistake. As a Cowboys fan, sure, go ahead. I'd love to see Daniel Jones in the Giants uniform for the next 5 years, because I think that means that the Giants are just going to suck for the next 5 years. But realistically, I think this is more about Daniel Jones showing that he can play in the league, just potentially not as a starter or not with the Giants.
Yeah, yeah. And when you look at the Giants too, I agree with you. It's all about Daniel Jones because when you look at this team's record last year, they were 6-10, but 4 of those wins came against the NFC East. Another win came against the Cincinnati Bengals, and they had some random win against Seattle, which kind of happens with every NFL team. Besides that, though, they had a tough schedule and they didn't beat anybody.
Well, listen, they were also the only team in the NFC East that had a consistent quarterback play all 16 games. Obviously, Dak Prescott got hurt in week 5. Yeah. The Washington football team, was playing, I don't know, they're playing merry-go-round with their quarterbacks. They had like 3 or 4 quarterbacks start. And then obviously the Eagles with Carson Wentz benching him and bringing in Jalen Hurts. So the only actual consistency at quarterback in the NFC East was the Giants, and they still showed up at 6-10. Albeit with Saquon Barkley's injury, I get it. But you have that consistency at the quarterback position, and the record still shows 6-10.
Yeah, no, and again, even I just mentioned that you said consistent quarterback play. They did have a couple games where Colt McCoy had to play, and one of those games was to get the Seattle win. So Jones only beat Cincinnati and NFC East teams. That's not good. Also, Daniel Jones, passing wise, the whole season didn't have one game over 300 yards passing. I mean, come on. Like, how do you call that? He's got to get on a higher level of passing the ball. He's got to make a difference. I know he has legs, but it's not like his legs were like, making a difference, right? Again, so the Giants will have an easier schedule most likely this year. So we'll see. I mean, the whole NFC East likely will. But again, this team is rebuilding, and the only thing really to look at with this team is Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, and primarily is Daniel Jones your franchise quarterback, because that's the only thing to look at this year. This team will not like to make the playoffs unless Jones takes 3 steps up and Barkley balls out and somehow the defense overplays. But yeah, this team and the Eagles, I don't believe have a chance at making the playoffs this year. All right, let's switch to the AFC South. We are going to start with, there's only 2 teams here that we think are going to make the playoffs, and you guys know that that's true, okay? The reason we picked the AFC South today is because we knew we were talking about Dak, and we knew we wouldn't have to talk about 2 other teams. Legit, right? At least with the NFC East, there's some storylines, and you can talk about the Giants and Eagles, and it's not that bad. But, we'll get to the Jaguars and Texans at the very end of this podcast, and we'll just explain what's going on with them. But we're not going to go full in depth. We'll go full in depth on the Titans and Colts. So, Jared, let's start with the Titans, right? This has been the best team, I believe, the last few years in the AFC South, led by Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill. They lose their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, to a head coaching job with the Falcons. So that's a little bit of a loss. And they potentially will lose Corey Davis as a wide receiver to free agency. Right now, they don't have any tight ends on their roster. They did not franchise tag John O. Smith. They don't have any other tight ends. Positives, again, they have Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, and A.J. Brown, and the full offensive line. So besides the receiving depth, this offense is very, very good. On defense, this was their problem, and this was the reason they weren't Super Bowl contenders. They were ranked, below, in the 20s and 30s in most defensive categories, and unfortunately, it's going to get worse. They've already released Kenny Vaccaro and Malcolm Butler as we speak on this podcast, and the rush defense wasn't there. Jadeveon Clowney and Vic Beasley had 0 sacks. Yeah, you're right. You just heard me right. 0 sacks, Jared. 0. Those 2 guys. So, and they're not on the team anymore. So, will it get better? I don't know. But so with this team, it's a lot like the Cowboys. It's solely defense. Do I think they obviously need to fix tight end and get another wide receiver because they lost Adam Humphries as well, a slot receiver. But this defense, spend your money on defense 100% and figure it out, because that is the reason this team is not a Super Bowl contender, and it's the reason this team might not make the playoffs. Now, they do have an easy division in the fact that they play the Texans and Jaguars, 2 times each, and the Colts aren't the best team in the NFL, right? They're a potential playoff team, but they aren't great. So they'll pop off some wins, but this team is not a Super Bowl contender at all unless they severely fix this defense.
I think you're getting back at me because you just stole every single note that I had for the Tennessee Titans team. Yeah. No, in all seriousness, you're exactly right. Their defense is what held them back last year. This team is built to run the football and try to have a good defense, which they did not have. You've got Derrick Henry King Henry, who has led the league last 2 years in rushing. And you've got Ryan Tannehill, who has proven to be a very capable and very good quarterback after starting his career in Miami and almost getting washed out of the league, right? But he's been able to revive himself, signed a nice contract extension last offseason. So he's got some security there with the Titans. And then also A.J. Brown, a very good outside receiver, and also one of the best offensive lines. I will say about the Colts, who we're going to talk about as well, and the Titans, the two arguably best offensive lines in all of the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's a reason why Derrick Henry is able to run and have so many gaping holes. It's not only because he's a very good runner, but it's because that offensive line is doing all that dirty work for him. So you're right. I think in free agency and in the draft, it is almost all about defense for this Titans team because you have the pieces in place on offense other than tight end. Now, there is a chance that they can still bring back Jonnu Smith.
Exactly.
But if I'm him, I think he's going to test the waters, see if he can get some more money in a bigger market because Tennessee is obviously not a major market. And even though we know Jonnu Smith because we're football guys, not many people know him outside of, if you're just an average Joe regular fan, right? So if I'm him, I'm actually looking to go to a bigger market, even if it's the same amount of money that Titans are giving him, just to get a little bit more exposure. So tight end and defense and more defense. I'm giving the Tennessee Titans the number one spot to win this division because of their offensive line and because of their solid quarterback and running back game that they have. I get it. They need to fix their defense, but the Colts, we're going to talk about in a minute, I think have a couple more issues. And we know what Tannehill and Derrick Henry and this offense can do from a running perspective. And we know that running the ball keeps the other team's offense off the field. You control the clock, and you have a better chance of winning the game. So the formula is there. They just need to bring the talent to incorporate it. So I'm going to give the Titans, as of right now, the number one overall spot in this division.
Yeah, and Jonnu Smith, a big touchdown guy. I believe they at some point he had like 6 touchdowns in a row or something like that. Yeah. In like 6 games in a row, he had touchdowns. So he's a guy that performs, on the biggest stage in the end zone as well. So yeah, I would like the Titans just to sign him back because I think that kind of, helps. He's a fast tight end, so he's a very athletic, fast tight end. So I think they should sign him. But yeah, again, it's funny too. Like I'm trying to explain how bad this defense was. I originally, when I was doing my notes, yesterday or just preliminary notes, I rush defense, the improvement is the top need, and then they released Vaccaro and Butler, and I'm like, this is real bad. Now they're saving cap space, so they'll probably sign guys or draft guys. Like they'll be able to do stuff in free agency. This team is not hindered by the cap or anything like that, but they need to make those improvements, or this team has no chance at a Super Bowl. No chance.
Well, listen. Jadeveon Clowney and Vic Beasley, to start off, are pass rushers. Yeah, they are not run-stopping defensive ends. So that's part of the reason why this Tennessee Titans team was so bad. And to me, from a sacking of the quarterback perspective, getting sacks, getting quarterback pressures, that they could lose some there. But from just a rush defensive perspective, I don't think they're going to miss Jadeveon Clowney or Vic Beasley because those guys didn't do jack in the run department. So that there just needs to be a complete upgrade from the beginning. And on top of that, like you mentioned, when you don't get sacks, when you don't do what you're there to do, what you're specialized as, you're really going to get the boot, right? Because it's like, okay, we get it if you're not completely stopping the run all the time, but then you can't even go out there and get sacks, which is what you're known for. Bye. You got to go. You're out.
I'll say, let me just say one thing before we move on. Jadeveon Clowney is the most overrated player in the NFL. This guy has been trending down ever since he hit that guy against the Michigan running back.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, the bowl game. Yeah,
exactly, the Outback Bowl. Never forget, 9 a.m. in the morning. Jadeveon Clowney.
That got him the number one overall pick.
Exactly, and since then, he even that next year at South Carolina, that he was forced to play because of eligibility, he didn't play well. And besides 1 year with the Houston Texans that he played well. Because, there's a guy named J.J. Watt on the other side that helps you out, right? You don't have to go against the best lineman all the time. Jadeveon Clowney is the most overrated player in the NFL, and it'll be interesting to see where that guy goes from here on out. Because I think he does not deserve big contracts anymore. And to tell me you had 0 sacks, come on. Like, that is just pathetic, right? I know he's dealt with injuries and stuff like that, but that's part of it. That guy is the most overrated player in the NFL.
I agree with Phil.
I will say this, Jared. I agree. I think the Titans are the best team if they improve their defense. I think the best team is the Colts if they don't improve their defense in the AFC South. So let me start on the Colts. All right. Obviously, we all know Carson Wentz is the new quarterback. Last year they had Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers played really well for them and almost beat the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. And so, Rivers did all he could and lost. This team does lose T.Y. Hilton, the free agency, so it will start the Michael Pittman era at wide receiver. Michael Pittman played very, very solid last year. And they lose Costanza on the offensive line, their left tackle. So they'll need to get a left tackle. Besides that, this team is kind of still intact on offense. Their running game, which was really, really good last year, Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines, that returns, as well as most of the rest of the offensive line besides Costanza, who was a great player, retiring. So this offense is solid. Now, the biggest question is Carson Wentz, right? What will Carson Wentz do? And through a lot of research, this match of offensive coordinator Carson Wentz and the style doesn't really fit already. The big thing about this team is that Carson Wentz, or the Colts on offense last year, and why they were so successful, is because they have a lot of short crossing routes, a lot of short passes, right? Philip Rivers, right? It makes total sense. Wentz is one of the worst NFL quarterbacks at throwing short. So so I don't even know how already this match is going to work. Normally you'd be like, okay, he's on a better team by your offensive line. But Carson Wentz is not good at what the Colts already do in the passing game. So I'm sure there'll be longer passes. They'll mix the playbook up for him. But that's a little troubling already to me. But again, when you have a strong running game like the Titans, that helps, right? You take off time off the clock. It makes guys more open, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? Then you look on the defensive side. Very, very solid defense as well. Led by DeForest Buckner and Darius Leonard. And I mean led by these guys. Those guys had amazing years last year. Darius Leonard already calling out people that are going to be free agents, saying, if you're not going to come here and play 100%, don't even come here and play. I love that. DeForest Buckner made the defensive line better just by himself, just by his performance himself. So if they can surround, those type of guys with a couple more additions and good draft picks, that defense is going to be top 15 in the NFL. Will they resign Xavier Rhodes? Possibly. Xavier Rhodes obviously was one of the best corners, if not the best corner in the NFL. I'd say 3-4 years ago. Had a horrible year in Minnesota and then bounced back last year in Indianapolis. Wasn't the corner that he always was, but he was better. And then one more thing to add about the Colts. They played the easiest schedule in the NFL last year and barely made the playoffs. So, there's a lot of questions with the Colts here. I think this team, with good Carson Wentz play and a little bit improved defense, I think this team is a playoff team and potentially wins the AFC South. I think if Wentz goes back and is just not the guy and they don't make improvements on the defense and their schedule is a lot harder than it was last year, I think, it's going to be tough. But again, like I mentioned with the Titans, they play the Jaguars and Texans twice, in a total of 4 games this year. So that obviously helps.
Yeah, see, the only thing I can disagree with you on is there's not a lot of questions with this team. There is one question. How's Carson Wentz going to play?
Yeah.
If Carson Wentz balls out, right, and returns to form, gets his head on straight, like he did in his second year in the league when he was basically MVP before he tore his ACL, this is a playoff team, right, and can potentially compete for a Super Bowl with the good defense that they have and the nice offensive weapons and the great offensive line that they have. It is literally all on Carson Wentz, right? Like Carson Wentz thought that he had some pressure in Philadelphia. Maybe he's not going to get the pressure from the fan base because that fan base boos Santa Claus and anyone that doesn't agree with them. So the Colts will maybe be a little more accepting of Carson Wentz, but Carson Wentz has, to me, all the pressure on him. He's going to a team with Frank Wright, right? When Frank Wright was the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. So there's that relationship right there. So, to me, I think, even though Frank Wright might not be necessarily calling the plays as the offensive coordinator, I think Carson Wentz should be at least scheme-wise familiar with the terminology of this offense, and it's not like he's going to have to learn something completely new. So right there, he's already should have a head start over what Philip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett and some of these other quarterbacks have had over the last couple of years. So to me, almost all the weapons are there. Yes. Could they use another number one receiver? Yes, they could. Could they use, a shutdown corner to go along with Xavier Rhodes? Yes, they could. But those are just pieces. They have the bones and a great structure to get themselves and catapult themselves into the playoffs. To me, this is all on Carson Wentz, and that is the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth questions that should be asked with this team. It is Carson Wentz or bust. Either he plays well and this Colts team makes the playoffs, or he doesn't play well, the Colts miss the playoffs, and Carson Wentz gets himself out the league.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens with these two teams, because obviously, there's you have the questions with the defense with the Titans, and then you have the question of the quarterback with Carson Wentz. Kind of the same thing, right? When you have a horrible defense, it affects you a lot, and when you have not a good quarterback, it affects you a lot. Just to mention about the schedule, Jared. Their schedule this year, now we haven't outlined the exact schedule and when these teams are going to play, but we know who they're going to play. So obviously, the Colts are going to play, they're going to play Titans twice, they're going to play Jaguars twice, and the Texans twice. So most likely, right, at worst, 4-2, right? At worst, 4-2. They're beating the Texans. Now they did lose to the Jaguars last year, week 1, but still. They play the AFC East, so they play the Patriots, Jets, Bills, Dolphins. All of those teams could be improved next year. That's a lot harder. The Raiders, whatever. Baltimore Ravens. And then, the AFC South gets the good old NFC West this year. So their schedule is going to be a lot harder. I mean, the NFC West, every single one of those teams could be in the playoffs. So this Colts team, Carson Wentz, it is not easy next year. It is not going to be easy, and I'm all for it. I'm all for sitting here and watching Wentz try to be better. And I hope he does better, because I think the guy was obviously robbed of a Super Bowl. I think that team would have went on, and Wentz would have at least made the Super Bowl that year against Patriots, and he was robbed of a chance to prove himself to be a legitimate quarterback. I mean, imagine, Jared, what we're talking about here. If Carson Wentz would have been the Super Bowl quarterback, would he still be on Philadelphia? Would we think of him as kind of a lackluster quarterback? Probably not. So, there's a lot of questions with Wentz and the injuries too. Those severe injuries he had have seemed to have affected him. So, and there's nothing worse than that in the NFL. Ask plenty of other quarterbacks that have had injury issues and really just suffered and couldn't play as well. But yeah, the AFC South is led by the Titans and Colts, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'll predict Titans as well winning the division, but it's not a sure thing. If the Colts come out and start balling, they'll win that division. All right, Jaguars and Texans, right? With the Jaguars, they're the worst team in the league, right? So we're not going to sit here and say they're going to turn around and make the playoffs. They're an interesting team, though, because it's the beginning of the Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer era, which we all didn't think that was ever going to happen, right? Like that we would be saying that. So there is some interest. Besides that, they have James Robinson, a fantasy darling at running back. The offensive line is okay on this team. The defense is not very good. They have C.J. Henderson, Joe Schobert, and Miles Jack, who are very good players. Biggest thing about the Jaguars is they have, I believe, the most cap space in the NFL, or like top 3. So
they have the most cap space every year.
I know.
Like, seriously, it's nothing new. They always have the most cap space. They're always top 3 in the draft, and they still suck. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Jerry. Remember we used to play, are the Jaguars going to make the playoffs this year or last year? I think we don't play those games anymore. Yeah. So this team, they have like some guys, right? But it's really about, can Urban Meyer get this team to maybe 4, 5, 6 wins, right? That'd be amazing. Will Trevor Lawrence ball out, win Rookie of the Year, right? Or be in the thing. That's really, if you're a Jaguars fan, all you care about this year. You're not making the playoffs. And yeah, your team will probably have a lot of fans in the stadium because it's Florida, but there's not much to look at this team. And then I think with the Texans, we'll just go over both, Jared, right here. With the Texans, I don't think it matters at all if Deshaun Watson's on this team. This team's going to suck. They have no talent on offense, especially if they lose Deshaun Watson. The offensive line is in shambles. And the defense is not very good either. So I think when you look at the Jaguars and Texans, these teams are going to get stepped over by a lot of teams, and they should be vying for those top 5 draft picks, maybe even top 3 draft picks next year. I like the Jaguars a lot more because they have Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer. There's a lot more to watch with this team. The Texans, again, Houston sports, you have what do you call it? Oklahoma City in basketball right above. You can cheer for the San Antonio Spurs. You got the Dallas Mavericks. You could go to the Cowboys, cheer for the Cowboys in football, or the Saints. They're close to baseball. You shouldn't already be cheering for that team because they're a bunch of cheaters. So go cheer for the Rangers, right? And then hockey, you don't have a team, so go cheer for the Dallas Stars. That doesn't change anything, But Houston sports, oh man, it's tough. It's tough. Your thoughts on the Jaguars and Texans, Jared?
Yeah, listen, for the Texans, simply, it's all of your star players are gone, right? You trade away DeAndre Hopkins last year. This offseason, you release J.J. Watt. Deshaun Watson is, in a sense, a holdout because he has said that he is not going to suit up and play. There's a standstill there because the Houston organization has said that they're not going to trade him, but eventually they will because it's what are they going to do? Like, Deshaun Watson's not going to come. He's not going to come to training camp. He's not going to suit up. Eventually, you're going to trade him and you're going to get something back. Or else you're going to be paying a guy millions and millions of dollars, like almost $40 million, I believe is his contract is $39 a year, averages out, to not be suiting up for you. And I'm sorry, you're not going to do it. So this Texans team, you're right, is a complete dumpster fire. If I'm a free agent, I'm not going there. If I'm a rookie that gets drafted there, I'm asking my agent to immediately trade me, right? Get me the hell up out of there because that whole organization from top to bottom is bad. It's not like they just don't have good talent, and they just need a couple years of rebuilding to get better. No. This starts at the very top with their ownership on down to their general manager, to the head coach, everywhere. Like it is a complete overhaul that this entire organization needs. And now, unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen because the owner is not going to fire himself unless he wants to stop making billions of dollars. Not going to happen, right? So unfortunately, I don't see this team really improving until the ownership starts to improve. So for the Texans, it's very simple. They have one of the worst rosters in all football, and the Texans are probably going to be and probably going to have the number one draft pick next year, right? It's not going to be the Jaguars anymore because I think the Jaguars are a better team, like you mentioned, because they have Urban Meyer, who is a proven college coach. We'll see what he does in the NFL. His first time ever in the NFL as an assistant or head coach. And it's basically a foregone conclusion that Trevor Lawrence will be the number one overall pick and he will be the franchise leader there. So you're right. I think the Jaguars have some pieces that they can build off of, a decent offensive line, James Robinson, DJ Chark at wide receiver, and then a couple pieces on defense, even though they still need a lot of help. I would rather be on the Jacksonville Jaguars any day of the week and twice on Sunday as opposed to being on the Houston Texans, plain and simple.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. I'll say this: the Texans could be the first 17-loss team. They're in the running as the worst team in the NFL. So we saw Jaguars go 1-15 this year. We've seen teams go 0-16 twice in the Lions and Browns. Texans might be an 0-17 team. If they keep Deshaun Watson for some reason, they will win some games. But this team is going to be really, really bad, really, really bad. All right, we'll end the podcast on that, and we probably won't talk about the Texans anymore the rest of the season unless we're mentioning them that they traded Deshaun Watson, and that's it. So next week, really important, next week is the free agent signing period. So we are going to have a big-time podcast for you next week. Jared, what we most likely probably will do is wait for all of the signings to finish of the period. I think it's the March 15th to like the 17th or whatever, when teams are going to be talking. Like free agency officially starts March 17th next Wednesday. So most likely you guys will either see one more podcast where we do a couple more previews, or we'll do a podcast next week that's completely about the free agency signings and other news potentially. But there's going to be big stuff next week for the Cover 2 podcast. So stay tuned. There'll be a lot of NFL stuff, but we will definitely be recording and potentially even twice next week.
I'll say this too. So you're right. The free agency period technically starts when the new league year begins.
Yeah.
But there's what they call like a legal tampering period. And I think that starts either Sunday or Monday. So that tampering period is when players and agents can actually talk to teams and verbally agree to contracts. So starting this Sunday and Monday, you're going to hear guys verbally agreeing to contracts, right? So they're not going to have to necessarily wait. They'll have to wait until the new league year to go in person and sign. But we're going to start to hear things coming in as soon as late this weekend and early next weekend.
Yeah, so again, we'll be covering that for sure. We'll probably have a podcast about that later in the week, and again, maybe we'll squeeze in a couple of division previews. But most likely we'll just wait till after and then start talking about teams, improvements, and stuff like that. What we've tried to do the last couple of weeks is talk about the divisions that we didn't think free agency would matter as much to, right? So we're going to get into the teams, where free agency could make teams Super Bowl contenders, could make teams playoff contenders the next couple of weeks. Obviously, what we have left is the NFC West and NFC North, the AFC North and the AFC East still to do, because we think there's going to be the most turmoil in those. So we intentionally did not do those before the free agency period. So again, go back last week, check out the NFC South and the AFC West. This week we just did NFC East and AFC South. And then again, the Super Bowl preview is where we did the Chiefs and Buccaneers. But for this podcast, we are finished. I am Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 podcast. Dak is back with the Cowboys, baby. See you guys.
Let's go!